Hey, good morning. Good to be with you in Second Samuel again. We're looking at Second Samuel 13 through 15. I want to take these chapters all together because it shows us the major consequences of sin. David has just uh, been with Bathsheba and killed Uriah or had him killed, and Nathan has come and told him what's going to happen. And in these three chapters, we see how his sin, the consequences of his sin, play out. We have to know that sin has major consequences. Even when we're delivered from death by the cross, we still bear the discipline of and consequences of our sin. If we are blatantly sinning, we are bringing consequences onto ourselves on earth. And I can't think when I do sin, well, I'm forgiven. And just because I'm forgiven, then I don't have to worry about sin or worry about the consequences of sin. They have very real consequences. My addiction, if I have an addiction, and that doesn't just mean to drugs or alcohol, that means an addiction to anything, is going to tear my life apart. It's going to ruin my relationships. It's going to affect how I live. It's showing me my worship of something other than the Lord. My anger, if I'm dealing with anger, is going to drive people away from me. It's going to harm my relationships around me and even be passed on to my children. So our sin does have consequence. Our pride has consequence, and we have to realize that David's sin in this previous chapters with Bathsheba had some serious consequences. Look at if you're in the text, 2 Samuel 12, 10 through 12. It says, "Now therefore the sword," and this is Nathan talking to David about what God is bringing to him because of his sin. "The sword shall never depart from your house, because you've despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he will lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun." You see, as we move through the next three chapters, actually all the way to the end of 2 Samuel, we see how David is paying for what he has done, not as in penance, but because there's consequences. Sin affects those around us. And in 2 Samuel 13, we see David's son rapes David's daughter, and Absalom, his son, his other son, David's other son, murders the son that raped the daughter, Amnon, who raped Tamar. Then Absalom flees for 3 years to Geshur because he thinks David's going to kill him. And then David allows Absalom to come back in 2 Samuel 14, but he doesn't allow him to come into his presence. He says he can come back into Israel, but I don't want to see him. I can't be with him. And you can see how the relationship is harmed between a father and a son because of originally David's sin. And it started to create this generational sin. And then after 2 years of Absalom being out of David's sight, he allows him to come back into his presence. And it seems like it's going to be great when we get to 2 Samuel 14, verse 30, I think it's 33. It says that Joab went to the king and told him, and he summoned Absalom. So he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. And we think, oh, good, everything is going well. But then we just keep reading right into the next chapter. And when we get there, we see that Absalom has conspired to overthrow the king, to take the kingdom, take the throne, and remove his dad. And that, again, brings more relational harm. But we need to see what is amazing about David here. David doesn't sit and wallow in his how this is not fair, how this has come against him, and it shouldn't be happening because he's the king, the chosen one. He's anointed. He's the one whom God is bringing his Messiah. He doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say this is not right. This is not fair. He knows he created this mess. He knows that he broke relationships, and he's broken over that, as we read in Psalm 51. But he accepts the Lord's discipline. He recognizes that his sin deserves whatever the Lord decides. And when we get to chapter 15, verses 25 and 26, this is what he says. The king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back to the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him." David's been run out of the city, and he says, look, take the ark back. It belongs there. That's what God commanded. We're not creating a split in the nation. I'm going to leave. And if God thinks I should come back, then great. If not, let him do what seems right and good to him, because he is God, and he knows the Lord always makes the right decision. And I hope that we know that. In our discipline, Hebrews 12 says, we should look to our discipline, understanding that we are being treated as sons and daughters of the King. A good father disciplines his children, and that's what's happening here. And that's what happens to us in our own sin when we're disciplined in our own sin. We should not look to it as this is unfair, but God is treating me as a son or a daughter. So may we not think too highly of ourselves and what we think we do and do not deserve. Let us accept from the Lord what he has given to us. May we learn to see the discipline of the Lord as a good thing, working out of our lives that which is sinful, and humbling us so that we learn to rely on him. I hope that this is helpful. I hope that the Lord is teaching you something about his discipline, about the consequence of sin, that it's not something to be messed with, that we don't take it lightly just because of the cross. We are forgiven, but that doesn't mean that we can just do whatever we want. We're called to be obedient, to live for the King, and it's a privilege to do so. So I pray that we look at David's life and learn from his response to discipline, his understanding of consequences of sin, and may we know that the Lord is good, even in those consequences. I love you guys. I miss you. I will see you soon, and see you tomorrow.